Okay, so we're in section 6.4, similar and congruent figures. The first thing you need to know is the definition of a similar figure. They have the same shape, but not necessarily the same size. The symbol, you need to write this down, and it's written up there on the board too, is that squiggly line. You need to write that and write that that is the symbol for similar. So similar equals, and then write that little symbol so you know that whenever you see that, it means the figures are similar. You also need to know what it means to have corresponding parts. They're in the relatively same position on both figures, okay? So this is an angle that's in the same position on both figures, a side that's in the same position on both figures. All right, so let's see here. We're going to skip over the properties for a minute, and we'll go straight over to identifying corresponding similar figures. What do you notice? What's the first thing you notice about these two figures? Well, they're the same shape. They're both triangles. Are they facing the same direction? No, they're flipped. Okay, so here's what I tell students whenever I teach this lesson. This is kind of deceptive as far as matching up which angle corresponds with which angle because it's flipped. Now, for this figure, it would be fairly simple to kind of flip it mentally and be able to match up the angles, but really a foolproof and sure way of making sure that you get the angles matched up correctly in the sides is to go by the sequence that's listed. It's always going to be listed like in your directions or in the question itself. So for the sequence, I see triangle LMN is similar, here's my similar symbol, to triangle PQR. All right? So I go by the order of the sequence. That angle L and angle P, because they're both the first letter in the sequence, that they are corresponding. And what would be corresponding to angle M? Yeah, the second letter in the second sequence, angle Q. What would be corresponding to angle N? Angle R. And those are my three pairs of corresponding angles. Now, I mean, I could write them in reverse, but it's still the same pair, so I don't have to do that. Now let's talk corresponding sides. All right, well, here's one side, side LM. That's the first side here in my sequence. So side LM and side PQ are corresponding. Can you find another pair of corresponding sides? What would it be, Janie? Yes, very good. Side MN and QR. Anybody think they know the third pair? Wame? PR, very good. So it's going to be side LN and side PR. Now, if you said RP, that would be okay. It's just, you want to write it alphabetically. And those are my three pair of corresponding sides. Now, if you had a four-sided figure, how many pair of corresponding angles would you have? Four. And four pair of sides. If you had a five-sided figure, which you do on your homework, how many pairs of corresponding angles? Five. There's 5 angles in a five-sided figure, and then 5 pair of corresponding sides. Also, because there's 5 sides to the figure. All right, so it just depends. On a triangle, you'll have 3 pair. On a quadrilateral, you have 4. On a pentagon, you have a 5-sided figure, you have 5. Make sense? Okay, so corresponding angles and sides. Any questions there? Any questions? Being able to identify. That's going to be the first question on your homework tonight. Okay, so we're going to kind of build on that, and we're going to do one on our own. Now, how many sides does this figure have? 4. So it's anybody know what shape that is?
Squares.
Nope. Are you kidding me? 4 equal angles and sides? No, not quite.
What is it? Quadrilateral?
It is a quadrilateral. What kind? Not a rectangle. I don't see 90-degree angles. It is a trapezoid. Very good. Yep. Yep, it's a trapezoid. Okay, so I want you to name me the 4 pairs of corresponding angles and the 4 pair of corresponding sides. Okay, so angle A. What angle corresponds with A? Y. What? The first one, W. What about B? X. What about C? Y. What about Z or D? Z. Very good. Okay, so you just go by the sequence. Everybody kind of catching on to that? All right, so side AB corresponds with WX. And BC. XY. And CD. Okay, does anybody besides Wame know these? All right, and what's my last one, guys? AD and WZ. All right, who got them all right? Who got them all right? Anybody get them all right? Okay, so now I'm going to put values to each one of these side links, okay? It says, given that ABCD is, what is that sign? What does that sign mean? Similar to JKLM, find the, well, there's a word we recognize, ratio of the lengths of the corresponding sides. So here's what you need to do. You need to find a pair of corresponding sides in these figures. Can anybody give me a pair of corresponding sides in the figure? Janie?
Like in one or out of both?
Well, you need one from one from the other for them to be corresponding.
AD and then MJ.
Okay, very good. So she said AD and JM. Does everybody agree that those are corresponding? They're the first and last in each figure. So AD and JM. Now I'm going to write the values. What is the value for AD? 4. What is the value for JM? 6. Okay, and when we reduce that to simplest form, what would it be?
2/3.
And that's your answer. Okay, now in theory, let's say, okay, so she picked that pair of corresponding sides. Well, what if Avery picked a different one? Okay, so let's pick a different one and see if it's going to matter. Somebody else give me another pair of corresponding sides. You only have to do one on your homework. Talmadge, can you give me another pair?
B, C, and KL.
Very good. B, C, and KL, because they're both the middle two. B, C, and KL. So what's the value for BC? 2. And what's the value for KL?
3.
And if we do all 4 pair, they're all going to reduce down to 2/3. So you see, it doesn't matter if Talmadge picks BC over KL, or Janie picks AD over JM, and Lexi picks a different one. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a corresponding pair, it's going to be the same exact value. So that's why you only have to do one. Okay? So do you see how example 2 kind of ties in with example 1? You've got to be able to recognize which sides are corresponding in order to be able to do this. Okay? So you've got, I think, like 3 of these questions on your homework. All right, so now we need to check to see if the figures are similar. All right, well, this involves setting up a proportion. Okay, so in this example, it says a soccer field is a rectangle that's 70 yards long and 40 yards wide. The penalty area is 35 yards long and 14 yards wide. Is it similar to the field? Okay, so again, I need to set up a proportion. So go ahead and reread the first sentence and set up a ratio that would represent the soccer field. Okay, anybody have an idea? What's it going to be?
70 over 40.
I just do it how I read it, 70 over 40. Okay, now pay very close attention. Is this length over width or width over length? Is 70 the length or the width? So I did length over width. So in my second ratio, I must still, again, do length over width. So just because the order here is length over width again, doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. You have to pay very close attention. What if on the second one, they switched it and gave you the width first, to see if you were paying attention? Does that make sense? So make sure, since the first ratio is length over width, that your second ratio is also length over width. Go ahead and fill it in. All right, so what's my second ratio?
35 over 14.
35 over 14. Does anybody remember how we check to see if it's a proportion? How do we check? If we know all the values, how do we check? We did this on our homework last night, Greg? Very good. You cross multiply 70 times 14 and 40 times 35. So 70 times 14, does that equal 40 times 35? If it does equal, then they are similar. If it does not equal, then they are not similar. Go ahead and work out those numbers. So what's 70 times 14? 980. And what is 40 times 35? All right, 1400. Do they equal? Nope, it's not similar. Not similar. All right, any questions? Any questions? Okay, very good. All right, now example 4 is congruent figures. Now, congruent figures, you need to write this down, have the same shape and size and measurement. And measurement, okay? So congruent figures are also similar. Yes, that is true also. Now, look over here at all these. You don't have to draw the figures, but look at all these red lines, like all through these figures. Well, these red lines are pretty significant because that tells me which sides match up with which angles match up with which ones are congruent. So if I see a side with, say, one line through it, it's congruent to the side that also has one line through it. You see that? And then same goes with 2 lines and 3 lines. They're congruent with the matching sides and angles. Okay, so we can use this information. We can use the fact that my sides and my corresponding sides and angles are the same measure to find the measure of unknown sides and angles. For example, it says find the measure of side CD. Side CD. Well, CD is over here and there's no measurement there. But what is the corresponding side to side CD? YZ. Do I know side YZ? I do, and it's 16 meters. So since its corresponding side is 16 meters, this one is also 16 meters because they are congruent. Does that make sense? All right. If they were similar, that would not be the case because they're different sizes. But if they're the exact same size and they're congruent, then I can just go off that measurement. All right, now I want you to find the measurement of side WZ. All right, so WZ corresponds with AD, which is 12 meters. Not drawn to scale. Don't focus on that part. All right, now find angle W and angle Y. Doing the same thing, you're going to use their corresponding angles to find the measurement. All right, so for angle W, what is the corresponding angle? Angle A, which is 105 degrees. And for angle Y, what is the corresponding angle? C, which is 80 degrees. All right, so are you kind of connecting that? So how we can use corresponding angles and sides to find unknown angle and side measurements. All right, so that's going to wrap up our lesson today and everything you need to know for section 6.4.